Hello, everyone. If you've joined us already today, we appreciate it. We're going to give it just another 30 seconds or so to make sure everybody has a chance to get in, and then we will start the webinar. Okay, I think we're ready to get started today. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. We certainly appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy schedule to attend this with us. I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are encouraging questions. So throughout this webinar today, please feel free to submit questions, comments as we go through, and we will try to answer as many as we can when we get to the end of the webinar. Today, I'd like to actually introduce the panelists. Myself, I'm John Frazier. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Synoptech. And with me today on the webinar, I've got Miguel Sanchez, who is our Senior Vice President for the Business Services Solution Group, as well as Mike Bank, who is our VP of Sales and Alliances. Together, we will present the content and answer the questions that you present. We'd like to get started with a quick poll as we kick this off. The first polling question should be present, and you should see it on your screen. While you are taking the poll, I will go ahead and talk a little bit about, what digital transformation has been defined as. And as you can see on the screen today, Gartner has actually defined digital transformation as the process of exploiting the digital technologies that are present today and the supporting capabilities to create a robust new digital business model. And that's very important because, as we know, there are many different interpretations on what digital transformation is and what it can be. And the purpose of today's webinar is to walk through what some of the myths might be and some of what the issues are and opportunities are around presenting a digital transformation program. So just real quick today, through the digital transformation has been a goal for many companies. Even before the pandemic hit us prior year, the progress made on the front over the last year is probably more significant and has resulted in faster and bigger results in transforming organizations than the previous several years prior. Now that businesses have seen the value that they can drive from the effort of a digital transformation program, there's actually a greater desire to progress further and faster through their roadmaps. So to that end, today, we want to spend a little time talking about what some of the transformation myths are and why we believe that they are just that, myths. We want to talk a little bit about what a digital maturity model could look like for an organization, but mostly we want to spend time covering a real success story showcasing one of our customers as they've gone through a digital transformation journey And that to us is really where the rubber meets the road. Just real quick, Forrester did a survey back in 2020 just to test and understand where organizations feel that they are on their digital transformation journey. And as you can see, the vast majority of organizations believe they're still at the nascent stages of their journey. Most organizations are in the beginner. As you can see, 47% respondents believe that they are in the beginner phase, while a pretty healthy number, 39%, are sitting in the intermediate category. But what's really telling, and obviously what we believe is the opportunity as organizations mature, is to take the number of those organizations that believe that they have become advanced in their journey in driving their business and their organization towards a different outcome.
Thanks, John. You know, I know that everyone just took the poll, and we wanted to convey to everybody the results of that. It was a telling poll and a little bit of a trick question. What is digital transformation to you? 28% an upgrade, 14% process automation, 14% digitization, 14% application modernization, and 28% all the above and more. I think that's pretty telling because of those folks that voted on it's the above and more. That's what we're going to focus on today. And specifically, you know, a couple observations. Though digital transformation has been a goal for most companies, even before the pandemic, the progress made on this front in just the last year alone is significant, as John had mentioned, and even faster than what has been accomplished over the previous years. The drivers that we see can be numerous, but what we're seeing as a majority is, number one, changes in the customer themselves, their buying behavior, their expectations, customer acquisition, interactions with customers, and their general expectations of their suppliers. Secondly, market disruptions, and this includes incumbents as well as startups. Organizational optimization, companies rethinking where IT lands and its impact across the enterprise, and even IT rationalization. The pandemic has forced IT leaders to reprioritize their roadmaps for IT. The pandemic itself was an accelerator for digital transformation. Almost 2/3 of IT decision makers say that pressure stemming from the pandemic accelerated their digital transformation efforts. And further, digital transformation is a performance augmentation for competitive enterprises. Specifically, successful and effective digital transformation programs produce 26% more profitable companies than the industry average, as well as a 12% higher market evaluation. Nevertheless, many organizations are facing several roadblocks on their digital transformation journey, the most significant and most damaging barrier being the myths that surround it. So we seek in this webinar to debunk a few of the myths surrounding the digital transformation today, so that organizations can feel confident towards steps in their journey and not being deterred when challenges present themselves. So with that, why don't we launch our second poll?
Thanks, Mike. And in the first poll, we asked you, what digital transformation was to you. In the second poll here, now we want to understand, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do as an organization, short and long term, by driving a transformation program? And while you're taking the poll, we'll go ahead and jump into reviewing the myths that we believe are just that, myths that we will talk to. Miguel?
Oh, that's me. Thanks, John.
Oh, Mike.
So, myth number one, digital transformation is only about technology. It may be common that most discussions regarding digital transformation revolve around technology alone. While technology is important, it's not necessarily everything. We typically see two underlying outcomes encompassing one, relative value, and that's the unique measurement outcomes aligned to achieve organizational consequences with deliberate purpose. And then secondly, deliberate choice to move from operations to a mode of innovation. For example, from a customer delivery standpoint, a company may want to deliver the highest quality service to its customers in a cost-effective manner and would need technology to drive a differentiated outcome. However, technology is the means to achieve the outcome, not the outcome itself. So digital technology is not only about the technology, but it's also addressing unique company properties, such as rethinking product and service life cycles, improving the customer experience, improved decision-making, talent management, creating peak performance teams, culture, and most importantly, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, a mindset of innovation, spreading the responsibility of innovation throughout the entire organization instead of confining it to designated silos by expanding IT as a broader initiative. The second myth is that digital transformation and digitization are the same. Digital transformation defined is the conversion, the change in state realized by external, that being customers, as well as internal, that being employee stakeholders. It's the use of technology, people, and process to fundamentally change business performance, solve problems, and satisfy customers. It requires cross-development collaboration, pairing business philosophies with rapid technical development. And it's also the change undertaken in the pursuit of new business models and new revenue stream driven by changes, again, in customer expectations around product and services, where digitization, on the other side, is the internal processes and the steps forward in a digital business, as well as the use of digital technologies to change a business model and provide new revenue and value producing opportunities. Myth number 3, digital transformation is a one-time project. First, digital transformation is not quick by any means, and it's certainly not a single initiative where one allocates a few resources to and completes it just in a few months. Rather, it's a continuous process, a need for focus, commitment, and measurement from several other business units to be successful. In addition, the amount of change along with the pace, it requires a programmatic approach to effectively manage on an ongoing basis. Secondly, while some results can be realized immediately, it may take more than a year to recognize tangible value from digital transformation initiatives. Commonly, digital transformation is the process from continual incremental improvements that then yield to the next layer, which is siloed operational disruption, which eventually yields a state of integrated and relevant technical transformation, thereby sustaining a real competitive advantage. It becomes a reliable and trusted business model. It becomes a cultural norm of innovation that spans from the employees up to the board level. And finally, it becomes a rationalized asset for IT versus just being seen as a cost center. Myth number 4, digital transformation is a single layer. Many companies see digital transformation, and let's be honest, IT, as a cost center and not a rationalized asset. With real digital transformation, IT budget is not only serving the IT department, but rather internal and external stakeholders. We talked about the mindset. The mindset has to be different. As you can see from the illustration, the IT budget is now multifaceted investment portfolio that covers an array of categories. It's both the challenge and an opportunity here. Further, it stretches outside the enterprise to delivery partners, supply chains, indirect sellers, etc. It cannot be accomplished without a company accepting comprehensive change. Gartner recently released a quote that says 45% of executives believe that the leading barrier to successful implementation of digital transformation is 1, the lack of change management skills, and secondly, insufficient leadership inside the organization. The opportunity begins by carving IT into these, as well as other investment categories that represent outcomes the companies are trying to achieve, rather than transforming just a technology leader, a group, or a team. Digital transformation is a shift with how a company thinks, acts, and ultimately aligns the stakeholders and the customers to a wider degree. It's what we go to market and we talk to our customers about a digital fitness, how the tools, the people, the organizational design, the leadership go to market, and other solutions that are woven throughout the enterprise. And finally, the fifth myth, digital transformation can't be measured. People are most used to measuring common elements that are in their control today with the tools and the platforms that they have. And they can be derived from internal platforms such as an ERP system. These are look-back measurements such as bookings, costs, profitability, metrics of operations from the past. But what about movements of their competitors? What about shifts in real time of customer behavior? What about predictive modeling of supply chains with real data? In this new world, we see many organizations lacking the knowledge of what is possible. In this new world, what is thought as important is now changing. So we offer a few examples right now to commonly measure the outcomes of digital transformation, such as operational excellence, the deep inspection of how long certain processes can take to compete, and where are the hurdles. What are measured here are employee productivity, cycle times, real-time identification and reaction to trends with data insights. For example, data transformation opened up a new window to current market trends. Company insights are available instantaneously, therefore comparing market trends and realigning to compete at rivals at once in real time. Another example is time to market and scalability. Real-time information offers better insight to what's happening right now. Cutting-edge technology such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, for example, also has better predictions of areas which help businesses to make scalability decisions tactfully and with a high degree of certainty. The business gears up, upscales or downscales comfortably instead of feeling that there might be risk or alternatives. The measurements are speed to market, increased revenue, reduced variable cost. Risk reduction. In the conventional model, unknown risks are far higher as strategies are formed based on assumptions alone. In a data-driven model, for example, strategies are based on real-world data. Modern technologies, as mentioned before, AI and machine learning, provide prediction modeling, which is more based on these insights and probabilities and calculated by reliable data. And then finally, productivity and service levels. These include insights into process efficiencies or suggestions for improvements for service quality, customer experience, as well as employee efficiency. Gartner, again, going back to using Gartner as an example, an analyst recently posted that the idea of a digital workplace is to bring that same simplicity and intuitiveness to employees when they're doing their mission critical work. An impressive customer experience is possible only when there's an impressive employee experience, which can be assured with digital transformation. Measurements include reduced labor expenses, service level agreements to customers, service level objectives, saving material employee efforts across defined tasks, customer engagement, customer retention, and one I think that is overlooked is employee satisfaction measured by employee promoter scores. So if we looked at all 5 of the myths put together, we see them ranging. And so there are many more, but this is essentially for our time, what we want to share with you.
Thanks, Mike. Now we'll take a second to reflect back on our second polling question, which was, what are your short and long-term expectations around a digital transformation program? And it was kind of interesting watching the poll unfold because we actually saw neck and neck, technology upgrade, accelerated time to market, high employee productivity, or high customer engagement, all kind of sitting close together until the end. And then we actually saw technology upgrade came out at 37%, accelerated time to market, 25%, high customer engagement, 25%, and employee productivity, 12%. what was interesting, and we had kind of talked about this before we put the poll together, is we thought that some people might actually come to the table with some other expectations. And maybe Mike, you could spend a quick second talking about, in your interactions with our customers, what have you heard some of the other things that people are getting or wanting to get out of a digital transformation journey?
The measurable outcomes truly are the things that for each organization matter most to them. And that's why I use the word unique. So organizations, whether they might be in healthcare, in manufacturing, even state, local, and education, have outcomes, but they're going back to the customer expectation. They're looking at how coming out of the pandemic, things around expectations of the customer have shifted, expectations of employees have shifted, and how to make the buying process as well as the employee engagement much more easier and seamless by leveraging technology and a new culture.
Great. Appreciate that, Mike. Okay, let's launch our third and final polling question now. This one's going to be, as we've talked through a few items, an opportunity for you to reflect on where you believe your organization is in your own journey. And while you're doing that, we will go ahead and transition into speaking to what is a maturity model and what can a digital transformation maturity model look like. Go ahead, Miguel.
All right. Thanks, Sean. I'll wait for it to load up here. All right. So the digital organization maturity framework, this is really a method for self-evaluation and a starting point to making the journey. As you think through where you're at currently, with your digital transformation initiatives, where you land on the maturity framework, it's just as important to think through, the journey and what it takes to move forward and up. During this session, we've talked about the myths regarding digital transformation, and those myths may be contributing to where you're at today, and maybe that impacted some of the polling questions. And it definitely relates to your digital organization maturity. As mentioned, one of the myths, digital transformation is not a one-time project, and to really realize true transformation, it takes time. As specific initiatives are executed, as the organization begins to change the mindset, as the culture of a digital organization embeds itself into the business, benefits of that journey are realized over time, and you're able to achieve increased maturity as it relates to the digital organization. And quickly looking at the framework, and many are probably reading through this, you see that there are everything from opportunistic capabilities to embedded. And it could be argued, that every organization is digitally opportunistic in some way, right? There's all capabilities that many organizations have that are enabling maybe a specific function. And as you move to the right, those opportunistic initiatives become, more and more strategically aligned, planned, organized into a more programmatic approach. And then that's when you really become, and you start to embed the digital organization mindset or a digital mindset itself. And as you move up the maturity framework, you see that there's much more focus and broader participation across the organization in achieving digital transformation. And as Mike mentioned in a myth, that digital transformation, it must be multi-layered, right? It's just not about IT itself, but the broader organization, the business, the ecosystem, partners, competitors, etc. One thing to keep in mind is, we need to not only be looking at our internal processes and capabilities, but as I mentioned, the broader external ecosystem that we participate in. How do we create interest in the market? How are we attracting prospective customers? How are we acquiring those customers? And how are we continuing to retain those customers? At the end of the day, how are you really converting all the opportunity that's available to us in measurable, real business results? And as you move forward and digital maturity is realized, it will be important kind of to recognize the myths, what are the challenges, and really manage through that. And that really, takes the organization as a whole, a thinking, a thought, a culture to be able to move forward. again, going back to the myth, digital transformation is not the responsibility of IT or an IT function. It's a business strategic initiative. John?
Yeah, now I believe we want to move into speaking to the case study.
Oh, okay. Did the slides go away here? Okay. So the following case study, I think is a great example of an organization that was on the far left of the digital organization framework. Arguably, one half notch further to the left if that were a thing. Some of the challenges this organization was experiencing were, at a high level, information technology was a cost center and not a strategic driver. All this drove all decisions related to IT. So what happened in the past and really what the current state of the environment was at the time that we started the engagement. IT spend was not aligned to effectively move the organization forward. So a majority of the budget was allocated to keeping the lights on and not investing in technology to really drive the business forward. And it's not to say that the IT function wasn't operating effectively. It was in doing what it was doing, but the business was really looking to move forward, right? That there's all these things happening in the environment. There's emerging technologies. There's a competitive landscape that's moving forward. The competitors wait for nobody. There's new entrants into the market. So all barriers of entry, not all, but many, have started to reduce and come down. So who your competitors weren't yesterday certainly can be tomorrow. So all of these things, definitely needed to be considered. And this is what this organization was facing. Culturally, the thinking around a digital organization wasn't there. Again, I'm not saying the business was not forward thinking. It was just that the alignment between technology and the business objectives, the business strategy wasn't there. And as a result, the technology environment, was outdated. It wasn't providing the business with really the capabilities required to succeed. And the thinking within the IT and function itself wasn't forward thinking. As a result, and as we look at some of the business benefits of the digital transformation journey, they were able to achieve significant business results across the organization. And this is important to note that again, digital transformation is not for IT itself, but for a specific and measurable business results. So while they're still in process, they're still moving to the right of the framework. They are making progress towards becoming that digitally embedded organization. And following are some quantified benefits, definitely measured success. And it's important to note that these were prepared by an independent research study. So a couple of things here that we thought were interesting to share. They were able to achieve an increase in revenue after year one of $3 million. So this was a direct result of enabling technology to create smarter, more informed decisions real time. And then we'll talk a little bit about what was done from the infrastructure perspective to ensure that reliability and stability to support this. In addition, they reduced their traditional IT spend by 1.5 million. So this really allows the organization the ability to redirect budget to strategically aligned initiatives, increased stabilization, increased reliability. In addition, they introduced increased stabilization, increased reliability in the environment, plus the introduction of a service management function based on best practices. So what this really resulted in total was, an increase in employee productivity by about 161 hours per employee. And when you tie that all together, they were able to achieve about a little over $4 million in increased productivity. And again, this is over a relatively short period of time. In addition, many of these initiatives were completed pre-pandemic. So, Mike talked a little bit about some of the driving forces around the pandemic. We will say that, many organizations were much better prepared than others. And those that were more prepared were able to kind of recognize and, achieve some of the opportunity that came from this. And they were much better prepared, this organization was, to manage through the crisis. Over 640 employees were able to work remotely and be very effective and efficient day one. So there wasn't a transition from, where we're at to what do we need to do to enable our employees to work. So when you kind of tie all this together and these quantified results, they were able to achieve a return on investment of around 188%. And this journey isn't complete, so there's an additional opportunity. And that kind of leads into some of the unquantified benefits. And, a great example of, a digital organization beginning to embed itself into the organization, or the digital mindset, I should say, is, at this point, there's focused attention by all their C-level executives, by the stakeholders, that leverage technology, and importantly, the board. And I thought this was very interesting. In a recent discussion, the CFO mentioned that at the board level and in their board meetings, IT has taken a whole new priority in the discussion. And they're looking to ensure proper investment in their 2022 technology spend. So what does this mean? This means that, we were able to effectively, shift the mindset. IT is no longer a cost center, right? There's processes in place for long-term strategic planning and roadmap. And in fact, that was one of the things that, the CFO wanted to ensure was that, the roadmap was not only just looking out a year, but we had a 3-year plan. I mean, all that was strategically aligned so that in turn, she can go to the board, and ask for these funds, ask for this investment. And she was pretty excited, given some of the response at the board level, that they were also looking for this because this was one thing that they saw measurable and specific results. So then if we go to really the synoptic solution. So part of this was, getting the organization aligned, change the mindset, increase participation across the organization. Again, IT is a strategic driver and transformative. From a people perspective, it was not only about the mindset, but also identifying leadership and champions, planners, execution teams, all part of the process of embedding the digital mindset into the organization. And part of this as well was working with, the existing IT team, as they were able to kind of embed into our service model, having them think a little bit differently. And then that started, to move outward into the organization, and then taking the top-down approach by getting the C-level executives inside the board aligned, and then it all started just meet in the middle. As Mike talked about, and debunking one of the myths of digital transformation is we identified how to measure success. How do we effectively do that, and our progress towards success. So not only is it important to measure the end state or your objective, but how you're progressing towards that objective. What needs to be tweaked, what changes need to be made along the journey. Many organizations, in fact, aren't quite sure of the specific KPIs that are to be measured. And another comment here is we talk about digital transformation being multi-layered. It's interesting to note that more and more organizations are measuring metrics outside of the organization, such as competitor data, only published, of course, but there's consumer data, economic data, all tying this back to their internal metrics, like productivity metrics, revenue, gross margin, subscription, et cetera. An example of this, Marriott, many other the hotel chains out there, they're taking keen interest in measuring, subscriptions, rentals, views, postings by Airbnb. Why is that important? And when you look at Airbnb and some of the success story and going back to digital transformation, digital first, is the valuation of Airbnb exceeds that of Marriott and other hotel chains combined. And that's within a very short few years. They were able to do that. So, it's not only about what the organization is doing, but it's about what the broader ecosystem is doing. The implementation of processes, so allowing for more collaboration cross-functionally. Again, important to note that digital transformation is not just technology, it's more than that. It includes the broader ecosystem, the business users, each of the key stakeholders across the organization. Coming into the engagement, it's always important to assess the current state. So we go back to the digital organization framework. Where are we at today? Where do we want to be? So envisioning the future state. Once we have the vision, planning for this and putting together an IT strategic roadmap. What specifically is it going to take to move us in the right direction? And again, this is a highly collaborative exercise. There's prioritization, there's budget, there's planning, there's dependencies, etc. Then there's the execution, right? So we definitely move the organization towards a cloud-first strategy. So it was really the modernization of their legacy applications. It was an execution of a cloud strategy where it made sense. So I don't want to suggest that everything was moved to the cloud and all of a sudden these great benefits are achieved. And then there's, this provided the organization with, greater agility, the ability to leverage technology, from a different level, a higher level of sophistication, and to be able to be much more flexible, right? So the business changes, things change, consumers are changing at an accelerated rate, their behaviors, their expectations, and the environment has to be able, tuned and enabled to respond to that, quickly. And then finally, you wrap the implementation of a best practices IT service management function around that. This has enabled greater employee workforce productivity. The more efficient, the more productive you are at the operational activities within your function, when you're able to perform your function at a high level, that increases the time you get to spend external facing with your customers, your consumers, really understanding them. Your focus is really attention on, again, attracting the attention of prospective customers, acquiring those customers, and once they're acquired, retaining those customers. So when you take this all into consideration, you're able to tie it back to all the myths and how this organization started to, move those myths to the side, move past them, right? It's not only about technology. Through this, we all know digital transformation is about getting executives, the board aligned, the IT function prepared for the journey and to be able to execute on the journey. It is not one time. So just simply migrating to the cloud isn't digital transformation. It's a much broader program. It's multi-layered, not only about the IT function, right? It needs to be embedded within the organization. It needs to be embedded all the way up to the board level, the investment community. Digital transformation can't be measured. We know it can be measured. We just shared some of the results, on ROI, increase in revenue, et cetera. And it's really not so much that it can't be measured. It's more about what should we be measuring and how do we think differently about what we measure. So hopefully this case study, helped think through that, what it takes to become a digital organization, what the myths are potentially your organization is facing. Through this, you may, have been thinking about, yes, we ran into this, we've achieved this, we haven't achieved this, how to work through that. That's something that you and the organization will need to kind of really think through and develop a strategy around, and how to think about the measurements and all that is required to achieve your success.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I know this is a great case study, and I know we've got lots of customers who have had this sort of success. I might ask you a question based on your interaction with this particular customer. Where do you think they would be in their digital transformation journey? Would they be in the beginner, intermediate, or advanced stage of that journey?
Yeah, so if they're about intermediate, maybe a little to the left of intermediate, and that's a great question. And part of this was when we evaluated this, and we do this process, every 6 months or so, is kind of evaluate where we're at as it relates to the framework. That was collectively, the C-level execs and ourselves came to that evaluation in that metric. So we're all 100% aligned in not only kind of what we're achieving, but where we're currently at in the journey. So I would say they're just a little left of intermediate, but definitely, a lot of room to grow.
Again, it's a great example of a customer who's made great strides. I'd like to spend maybe a couple of seconds in reflecting on the last poll question that we put out to everybody. And if I was to reflect back to the Forrester survey that I shared early on, I would actually think our audience were the participants in the Forrester survey, because almost to a T, the percentages came out to be about the same as the Forrester study, which, the majority of folks are sitting in, about 42% of the respondents are in the beginner stage, 42% ended up in the intermediate, and 14 in the advanced. So it's interesting to see, that the market, that the community kind of has a consistent look and feel in terms of where they believe they are in their journey, and specifically your journey. Real quick, before we get into our question and answer, I would like to just remind everybody to please post questions. We have a few good questions to start with, and we would like several more questions to take from the audience before we end. So having said that, submit any questions you have, and maybe we'll go ahead and kick off with one of our first questions. Since we just got done talking about a good case study, there's actually a couple of questions that kind of go back to reflect on an organization and what they would think about going into a digital transformation journey. Maybe Mike, the first question I'll pass over to you. And the question is, how expensive is a full-scale enterprise-wide digital transformation project? And then how much of an organization's IT budget should be allocated to it?
I'm going to say it depends. What we do see to start with is that those organizations that lean on technology to enable, their key outcomes, just fundamentally, will spend anywhere between 4 and 6% of their revenue on IT. Again, those key industries, it could be healthcare, financial services, in some cases manufacturing, depending on the organization, and those folks that really lean on technology, their spend is typically above average. Now, of that, if the organization is in its very infantile state, or looking to gauge a roadmap, there might be an assessment to start with. And so it's always good to go into the art of possibility with options. So that's what we would strongly recommend. Typically, those outcomes are shared up to the board level so that they can remodel their business outward from 6 months to 3 years. When you start to look at what is possible on the spend side, a lot of folks think that going to a DT model will save tons of money, when in fact it's really the gains, the productivity, the market share, the revenue. They'll actually typically spend the same amount on IT. They'll just shift where the IT spend buckets are and spread that across the organization. And so I don't have an actual number for you, because as Miguel mentioned, there's a number of things that could occur to jumpstart a company. It could be a data insight project that spans across the organization. It could be a cloud first initiative. And so all of those would be spelled out and considered in a thorough assessment.
Great. Appreciate that, Mike. And I think you hit on a very key point. And unfortunately, you're going to hear a lot, it depends, because this journey is so unique to each organization based on their size, their maturity as an organization, whether or not they are a heavy IT organization or they more resource. So, the journey itself is going to be so unique. It's really hard to pin down an actual, what's the cost of an application deployment. But having said that, I would maybe kick into the next question, and that is understanding that a digital transformation program is not a one-time project. How much time does it typically take to reach the highest level of maturity? Miguel, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, within a year, we were able to implement, a few key initiatives to achieve that 3 million in increased revenue. So it really depends on where you're at. Now, I will say that in the case study, the organization was, again, a little left of digitally opportunistic, so a rating of 1, let's say. By implementing a more stable infrastructure, by moving some of those key applications into the cloud. In addition, by executing on a data strategy that was more aligned with the business. So the implementation or the understanding of key KPIs, what is success, organizing the data a little bit differently, getting the data model correct, and then reporting on that data model, building all the tools, enabling technology around that. Within a year's time frame, they were able to achieve that 3 million. Now, again, some organizations are a little bit further in some areas, so you may be able to quickly capture opportunity. But I would say 3 years or so is typically what we're seeing, and what people are saying is kind of the journey to that embedded organization.
Great. Again, appreciate that answer. And kind of an add-on to that, there was a question about how critical is an effective data strategy in achieving a digital program?
Yeah, so it's funny. About 20 years ago, my uncle said it's all about the data, and I wasn't sure what he was talking about. So if you look at what Salesforce is doing, and Microsoft is doing, Facebook, they create these platforms, these enabling technologies. They're digitally disrupting the industry, and many say it's a race for the data. Once you capture the data, once you have the data, you're in control and you're in the driver's seat. So when you tie this back to an organization, that data is critical, right? It drives, and it should drive, all decision making going forward. What are for example, how many subscriptions did you get this month? How many purchases? How many returns? Collecting all of that data. Who's your customer? How's your customer changing? All of that is so critical. So having that data model in place, having a highly effective data model is critical, really driving all those key initiatives. Because if you don't, have that correct, which building infrastructure to process poor data, it's kind of like that old, garbage in, garbage out.
Okay, great. Let's take the last question, because I think it should be a quick question. And the question was, what is cybersecurity's role in digital transformation? And I guess I would answer this. It's cybersecurity in and of itself is about reducing risk. And anytime you start talking about making changes in an organization's IT landscape, processes, the organization themselves, you have the opportunity to introduce risk. So, it's absolutely critical, if the intent is to come out at the end of the digital journey with the same sort of risk profile that you went into it with. And that all depends on the organization. Some organizations have a greater appetite for certain kinds of risk and others less. But at the end of the day, cybersecurity is a critical part of making sure that risk is reduced. And I think Mike actually mentioned it, in the digital transformation can't be measured myth. The answer is, you absolutely want to measure it going in, and you want to measure it coming out. So you have empirical data to show that your organization is in the same place or a better place, perhaps, if that's the desire. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We appreciate everybody's time today. Had some good questions. I appreciate my co-presenters here and taking the time. And if there are questions, please feel free to go to Synoptek's website, and you can click on the contact us, button, and get questions to the organization, and we'll be happy to answer them. Any closing comments from Mike or Miguel?
I want to thank everybody for joining. And if we can answer any questions for you following this up, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, and thanks again, and good luck on your journey. It is not as big and grand as an endeavor. These are things that are definitely achievable for every organization.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will, any questions that haven't gotten answered or that come through after this event, we will make sure to reach out and try to get answers for you. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.